Let's dive into a really powerful and, honestly, often damaging idea that quietly shapes entire societies. It's this belief that a family's honor is somehow tied directly to the choices and the bodies of its women.
Wow. That sentence right there, it just cuts straight to the heart of the whole issue. You know, it's a belief that isn't always shouted from the rooftops, but its effects are absolutely profound. They shape everything from personal freedom all the way to public justice.
So what are we really talking about here? It's what happens when the idea of honor becomes this dangerous substitute for genuine morality. The responsibility for being a good person gets misplaced. It gets shifted away from the individual and onto an external symbol.
Think of it as a shortcut. Instead of every person doing the really hard work of building their own personal character and conscience, a society can just decide that honor is something that can be guarded, policed from the outside.
And you can really see the two different paths laid out here. On one side, you have individual ethics. That takes work, right? It's about cultivating self-restraint. But on the other side, you have this externalized honor, which just relies on surveillance and enforcement by the group. It's a huge shift from developing yourself on the inside to being controlled from the outside.
Okay, so the big question is, why women? Why did they become the focal point for all of this? Well, the answer often goes way back to historical roles, where women were seen as the ones who carried the family lineage, and that made them the symbolic containers for a family's entire reputation and moral standing.
And what you end up with is this incredibly deep moral imbalance. A man's mistake is often just seen as, well, his own personal screw-up. But a woman's mistake? Oh no, that's treated as a stain on her entire family or community. It creates this system where one group is kind of excused and the other is intensely controlled.
And this is the crucial point. When a society makes that choice, when it chooses control over conscience, it's inevitable that it's going to target those who have less power. This isn't just some abstract theory. It has very real, very damaging consequences for the most vulnerable people.
So how does a system like this keep going? Well, this control is often dressed up as something else entirely. The restrictions placed on women are framed not as a cage, but as an act of care and protection.
You hear this phrase, or something like it, all the time. We're just doing this for your own safety. The whole thing is presented as this benevolent act, like a shield to keep you safe from a dangerous world. But we have to stop and ask a really critical question here, one that kind of blows up that whole argument. What is this protection, really, if the main thing it does is take away your freedom and your ability to choose for yourself? And that leads to this incredibly powerful reframing of the whole idea. This isn't protection, it's punishment, delivered before anything has even happened. It's treating people like they're potential problems to be managed, not as human beings who can make their own decisions.
So if one side of the coin is controlling women, what's on the other side? Well, it's what happens to men. They're often raised in a version of masculinity that comes with power and desire, sure, but without the accountability or discipline to go with it. The entire weight of restraint gets shoved onto just one side.
Now, a system like this, based on honor and control, has a breaking point. When its rules are challenged, and especially when the official institutions are weak, the situation can get out of hand really, really fast, and often violently. This is when you see other groups step in. Families, communities, sometimes even mobs. They take on the role of judge, jury, and executioner. In their minds, they're just restoring a moral order that they feel has been threatened. In that vacuum, where there's no effective, predictable justice system, the volatile and emotional code of honor rushes in to take its place. It creates this whole parallel system of justice, one that operates completely outside the law.
And when you put these two side by side, the difference is it's night and day. Real law, when it works, is predictable. It's consistent. It guarantees you a process. Honor, when it acts like law, is the exact opposite. It's arbitrary, it's emotional, and it almost always guarantees injustice because it runs on feelings and perceptions, not on facts.
Okay, so after all that, it's easy to feel a bit hopeless. But what's the way out of this? What does a path forward actually look like? The good news is it's not about destroying culture, but about fundamentally recalibrating its moral compass.
And this is so important. The goal isn't to just erase traditions completely. It's about helping them evolve, to shift their focus away from control and toward a much healthier, more responsible way of living.
So what are the actual steps? Well, first, you have to shift the meaning of honor, so it's about a person's own actions, not their control over someone else. Second,
You have to enforce the actual laws, consistently, for everyone. Third, focus on educating men about responsibility, instead of just defaulting to restricting women. And finally, we have to start seeing personal autonomy, not as a threat, but as what it is, a sign of moral maturity.
It's also really important to know what doesn't work. Symbolic outrage that just fizzles out after a week. Moral policing that hides behind the banner of culture. And giving people freedoms on paper but with zero real enforcement to back them up. All of these are just dead ends.
As we start to wrap this up, this quote just perfectly captures the whole argument. A system of honor like this isn't a sign of moral strength. It's actually an admission of weakness. It's a society confessing that it lacks the internal character to function without controlling its own members.
So it all boils down to this, really, the difference between external strength and internal strength. True dignity, whether it's for one person or a whole society, comes from self-control and personal responsibility, not from watching someone else's every move.
Because at the end of the day, you can't put dignity in a box and guard it. It's not an object you can protect. It's a value that has to be lived and practiced and demonstrated through your own actions.
And that leaves us with this one massive question to think about. This isn't just an abstract debate. It's about the incredibly deep, difficult work of changing a society. So how do you actually shift an entire moral framework from external control to internal conscience? That is the challenge that lies ahead.